Reparenting is about developing a new relationship with yourself, a more caring, kind, functional, encouraging relationship with yourself. So I've created this video to go with the video I did called Reparenting Yourself, which I will link here in case you haven't seen it. But I'm going to share some very practical tips for things that you can implement on a daily basis right away to begin to be a good parent to yourself, which is the core of reparenting. And in the Reparenting Yourself video, I identified 5 areas where parents ideally would be nurturing their children. And when we have not been nurtured or raised or encouraged or coached in these areas, we often don't do it for ourselves. So I'm going to give some very practical suggestions for each one of these areas. So, part of setting some very concrete exercises that you can do for reparenting is to make sure that they're structured as SMART goals, because sometimes it can be hard to figure out how do I set goals for these very amorphous things, taking better care of myself, setting better boundaries. So, let's start with the area of basic needs. Do you care for your own basic needs adequately? So, basic needs are sleep, exercise, nutrition, protection. Are you taking care of yourself in these ways? If not, let's write some SMART goals. So if you struggle with sleep, you've probably read some CBT-I, some cognitive behavioral therapy suggestions for insomnia. If you haven't, that could be a SMART goal. I will Google CBT-I suggestions this week by Friday and write 3 down that I'd like to try. That would be a SMART goal. Assuming you've read some of these, let's implement them. So here's an example, and now not everybody has to go to bed at 10 p.m. So this is just an example of a way you can set a SMART goal for yourself to improve your sleep. Step 1, I will turn off electronics by 8 p.m. 2, I will not use electronics in bed. 3, I will go to bed by 10 p.m. And 4, I will keep a log for 2 weeks of whether I've done these 3 things and how I've slept. And then at the end of 2 weeks, I will assess. Did this help? How did it work? Was I able to follow through? Then if you've watched my video on SMART goals for personal development, you'll know I usually suggest about a 2-week time frame to try things, and then a period of reassessment and non-judgmental assessment. So not judging yourself about how perfectly you followed it. Just notice when you don't take the step, why not? And then if you take the steps consistently, did it help? And if not, what could you readjust? How could you readjust this goal? So you could take this same structure and apply this to nutrition or exercise or other areas of basic care. If you're not fitting in doctor's appointments, maybe a SMART goal would be this week I will call my primary doctor and schedule an appointment within the month. It's very concrete and actionable. So let's move to the area of protection. Now, protection and safety is a basic need. If you are in a relationship with somebody toxic, setting goals around protecting yourself in that toxic relationship could be very important. If you know yourself and you know you're going to need help beyond self-help, which most people do for boundaries with toxic people, you might say, okay, I'm going to take the step and meet with a therapist. So part of my goal will be to research therapists this week by either calling people or looking them up online and speaking to 2 of them by the end of this week. So you make it very specific. Now, I'm going to give you, assuming that you've done some work on boundaries, I'm going to give you a very specific example if you are in a relationship with somebody who drinks too much. Now, perhaps this person is a family member and they begin drinking late afternoon and they get very belligerent when they drink, or they get very manipulative and it's very unpleasant. You could set some very practical boundaries for yourself, right? Boundaries are for you. They're not for the other person. The boundaries are around your own behavior, what you will and won't do, what situations you'll be in, what situations you won't be in. That is how you protect yourself. So here are some examples that work for many people who have a family member who drinks too much. Step 1, I will only call them before 3 p.m. Why bother calling them after 3 p.m.? They don't remember what you say, they get into an argument, they take what you say wrong. I won't call them after 3 p.m. Number two, I will only meet them for lunch, not for dinner. Number three, if you do have family get togethers that involve this person and you know they can go sour, you can have a plan B to strengthen your own boundaries so you can have healthier relationships. That is a part of reparenting. So let's talk about the higher needs of self-esteem and self-actualization. I've had many clients who put off activities that really would make them feel good about themselves. They put off things that really would lead them towards self-actualization because of the dysfunctional family system they grew up in, because they spend too much time taking care of other people's needs. So how could you set a SMART goal in this area of self-actualization? I'm going to use the example of higher education. So let's say you've always wanted to pursue a higher level of education, but you haven't ever been able to get yourself to do it. So take a step towards it. Step number one could be, I will research programs this week and I will sign up for virtual information sessions with 3 schools. It's very achievable, doable, specific, measurable, it's time bound. You'll know whether you've accomplished that or not. You could set another goal. I will begin to put $50 per week into a savings account to begin to save for schools. These are steps that you will be taking to do something to improve your life, and you're allowed to do that. Your higher needs matter. So just a reminder here, taking care of yourself is the core of reparenting. That's the core component, the core goal of reparenting. So let's move on to the second big area that I talked about in the Reparenting Yourself video, emotional validation. What's a way you can set a practical, actionable step around emotional validation? You could set a SMART goal of, for 2 weeks, I will journal at the end of the day about whether I validated my emotions or I criticized myself for them. That's a simple exercise of raising your awareness around whether you are validating your emotions or not. And emotional validation is key. It's key for a happier life, for beginning to be able to regulate your emotions, which is the third major area of reparenting work. So there are many practical things you can do to improve your emotional regulation. A very simple one is diaphragmatic breathing. And so you could set a goal in that area of, I will learn diaphragmatic breathing. And I'll link a video here if you are interested in a 3-week mini series that I have on YouTube that does help with emotional regulation and starts with the diaphragmatic breathing exercise. You could say, okay, I'll do this 3-week mini series and see how I feel at the end of it. Or you could simply say, I will learn how to diaphragmatically breathe and I will practice it 4 times a day for 2 weeks, just for a couple minutes each time. So very specific, measurable, actionable goal to help your emotional regulation. Other things that help with emotional regulation are meditation, emotional validation, which we just talked about, helps with emotional regulation. And if you have an extremely hard time with emotional regulation, you could set the goal of looking up a DBT therapist. Dialectical behavior therapy, I mentioned it in my prior video, is geared specifically to help people who have very severe dysregulation of their emotions. And it's a very effective form of therapy. So your SMART goal could be, I'll look on Psychology Today website, find a therapist in my area that specializes with DBT. So often reparenting does involve another person. We can do a lot self-help, but if our wounds were interpersonal wounds, like deep interpersonal wounds, we very often heal best in relationship. So finding somebody to work with that you can trust. And trust takes time to develop. You don't always trust somebody right away, but finding somebody you can work with can be a key to reparenting. And I also want to mention here, asking for help. Asking for help is a tool of reparenting. And that is a tool that really could apply to any one of the 5 areas. And asking for help and finding a professional to help you also applies to the 4th major area that I identified in the prior video of negative self-talk. If you are talking to yourself in a harsh and even abusive manner, so many people speak to themselves in an almost abusive way. Like if you use the same language to talk to somebody else that you use to talk to yourself, You'd be considered an abuser. We internalize abusive voices, and we can work to change that. So I do have a webinar on rewiring your brain for joy and confidence, which talks a lot about rewiring your brain. So you can sign up for that webinar in the show notes under this video. But rewiring that negative self-talk takes a lot of work. Another SMART goal could be I will journal at the end of the day about whether I spoke to myself as a friend or not. Raising our awareness on these issues is the first step in changing them. So this stuff is not easy. There's no magic solution. This takes work, practice, effort, but you can do it. And that leads me to the fifth area, which is reasonable self-discipline. So a role of a good enough parent is to provide the child with the means to develop reasonable self-discipline. Now, what do I mean by that? Reasonable self-discipline is not driving yourself into the ground that you're so ambitious, and it's not being unable to get off the couch, right? Like those are two ends of the seesaw. Self-discipline does not have to be a harsh, unpleasant thing. Very often we have a very negative view of the word discipline, but discipline can actually be a gateway to joy. And children growing up develop agency by accomplishing small goals. So if you were either robbed of that or encouraged way too much towards that, you can begin to incorporate a kinder, gentler, but also disciplined approach to yourself. So if you're somebody who completely lacks self-discipline, or you feel like you completely lack it, the best thing to do is to commit to setting small, achievable goals and to have an accountability partner. Now, the accountability partner could be a friend, it could be a life coach, could be a nutritionist, it could be somebody who works in the field of whatever it is you're trying to achieve. But an accountability partner is very, very helpful if you have a hard time motivating yourself to achieve goals, and also making sure that the goals are small, achievable, concrete, and actionable. So basically, SMART goals, the way I've laid them out in that video on personal development, because beginning to sense and feel your agency, your power, developing it over time, encouraging yourself to do new things and then doing them. It's a great way to build self-esteem and just a sense of accomplishment of I can do it. So that's my recommendation for you if you tend to feel like you really lack self-discipline. And on the other hand, if you push yourself way too hard, you're always trying to accomplish too much, you're running, you feel like you never can do enough, you feel like you are never enough, then a very practical thing you can do for yourself is to set some SMART goals in the area of basic self-care. So we're looping back around to the beginning. But know that just as you would not raise a child and make them work 16 hours a day and be deprived of sleep, be deprived of nutrition, be deprived of play, right? Play is very important. It's not fair to treat yourself that way now. Life is too short. So setting goals for yourself in the area of self-care. And the other thing you can do, and actually you really can do this no matter how you feel about discipline, but scheduling in time for play, scheduling in time to do something that you enjoyed doing as a child. Now, this is a little bit of caring for that inner child work, but it's also very practical. If you loved swinging on a swing at the park, go let yourself do that. Schedule it into your calendar. If you loved coloring and crayons, these are simple, easy activities to consciously work into your day to allow yourself to feel more joy. So I'm hoping that this practical approach to reparenting has been helpful for you. Please do let me know, comment below. Be very interested to know what you think. And if you have things that you've tried that have really helped in this area, please share them. That will benefit other viewers as well. And if you have not subscribed to my channel, please do so. I greatly appreciate it. Check out my free resources, which are in the notes underneath this video. I truly wish for you to be the parent for yourself that you would have wanted to have when you were a child. The parent you would want anybody to have. You can be that for yourself now.